So I should read the poem from the broadside that was produced for this. It's called Ezra Pound's Proposition. The first 3 lines of the poem are my 3-line summary of the meaning of the cantos of Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound's Proposition. Beauty is sexual, and sexuality is the fertility of the earth, and the fertility of the earth is economics. Though he is no recommendation for poets on the subject of finance, I thought of him in the thick heat of the Bangkok night. Not more than 14, she saunters up to you outside the Shangri-La Hotel and says in plausible English, "How about a party, big guy?" Here is more or less how it works. The World Bank arranges the credit, and the dam floods 300 villages, and the villagers find their way to the city where their daughters melt into the teeming streets. And the dam's great turbines, beautifully tooled in Lund or Dresden or Detroit, financed by Lazard Frères in Paris or the Morgan Bank in New York, enabled by judicious gifts from Bechtel of San Francisco or Halliburton of Houston to the local political elite, spun by the force of rushing water, have become hives of shimmering silver, and downriver they throw that bluish throb of light across her cheekbones and her lovely skin. So this is a poem of this weather. It seemed appropriate to read. West Marin, September. Tomales Bay is flat blue in the Indian summer heat. This is the time when hikers on Inverness Ridge stand on tiptoe to pick ripe huckleberries that the deer can't reach. This is a season of lulls, egrets hunting in the tidal shallows, a ribbon of sandpipers fluttering over mud flats, white, then not, a drift of mist wisping off the bay. This is the moment when bliss is what you glimpse from the corner of your eye as you drive past running errands, and the wind comes up, and the surface of the water glitters hard against it. That gave rise to this poem. I'm going to say the title, and then I'm going to ask each of you to say the title after me 3 times rapidly. The title of this poem is The Six Sheep's Sick. Try it. The 6 sheep's sick. The 6 sheep's thick. The 6 sheep's. Praise to the breath and the lips and the teeth. Praise to the tongue and the larynx and the pharynx and the soft palate and the hard palate and the vibration of the vocal cords. Peter Piper picked a peck of seashells by the seashore. She sells rubber baby buggy bumpers. It's early March, late afternoon. There's one tiny tufted titmouse in the bare branches of the sycamore just outside my window, the loudest and smallest of all the spring birds, its eye the size of a single black currant. 3 sweet notes, perfectly spaced, and then sometimes 4. Not difficult to say one tiny tufted titmouse, but it requires a small increment of effort. And in the bare branches of the sycamore is pure pleasure, not hard at all. When I read my poems aloud, I find it's hard to say that people stand on tiptoe to pick ripe huckleberries that the deer can't reach. Pick ripe huckleberries, aluminum linoleum. The round leaf buds on the tips of the branches of the sycamore are glowing gold in the afternoon sun. 3 sweet notes again. It wants a mate. Maybe. Maybe it's just playing. Researchers have taught chimps over 100 words, and the book says they can't use them to form new concepts. She sells pickled peppers. 3 notes again, but can't doesn't seem quite right. What if it's just not in the range of things they want to do? I want to say ripe huckleberries. The titmouse flits from branch to branch because I want to. Praise to the breath and the teeth and the lips. Praise to the tongue and the animal who first said pharynx and the one who first said larynx. Praise. I wasn't going to read this, but listening to Max, I just so loved not only those poems, but just the fact that you were doing them day after day. It put me in mind of, at the end of his life, when he was being hounded by the CIA and the FBI, Richard Wright, great black writer of the 30s who wrote Native Son, retreated to the countryside in France. He'd stopped writing fiction. In the last 2 years of his life, he wrote 800 haiku. It's a wonderful book of them. So the idea that one of our great prose writers is writing these gorgeous poems of daily observation is thrilling to me. Anyway, this is February Notebook, The Rains, a set of small poems trying to keep track of the weather. That begins with a prose prologue. In the days when I used to hunt ducks, the season always ended on the last day of January. And on that day, we usually hunted until it was too dark to see, so there was something poignant about the moment when the sun sank below the horizon and the sky turned rose, and the last ducks, mostly mallards and canvasbacks and widgeon and cinnamon teal at that time of year, headed south, it seemed reluctantly, for their winter feeding grounds in Mexico. Wavering skeins of them disappearing from sight as the dark took them. Some genius at the beginning of the last century planted Japanese plum trees all over the Berkeley Hills, the plums whose blossoming in Japanese poetry is a symbol for the earliest, iciest coming of spring. And the Berkeley weather suited them because every year by the middle of February, the streets floated in pink and white, mostly pink blossoms that seemed to hang in the air in a gelid and delicate balance until one of the hard rains of that season came straight off the Pacific and took them down. If it happened early, the trees were briefly bare again. If it happened late, the new leaves had already begun to make a coppery sheen, just as the air was getting milder, and the bright red flowering quinces had also begun to blossom. One year, after I'd watched the ducks disappear and was driving home and came to my street, which involved cresting a small hill, my headlights caught in a flash a glimpse of the first plum blossom on a bare tree. Last duck, first blossom. And the days were getting longer. At the gym. Each body odd or beautiful, odd and beautiful in its own way. Hard rain slapping the window, lashing the window, waves of it coming off the bay and the Pacific beyond, as if to say, I'm energy, I'm here. And when the sky clears, rainwater runneling down the leaves of the oaks, dripping from the leafing out hydrangea. February in old Rome was the month of purification. We don't have that festival. The large, cheerful eyes of the yellow duck of my daughter's rain boots staring up at me from the floor at the entryway near the kitchen in my memory at this time of year. Purification, the desire for the cessation of desire, is a desire. Observation. The old art historian, I don't see him at the gym anymore. Or maybe the old art historian, I don't see him at the gym these mornings. Song, Valentine's Day song. I used to see her at the track, her streaming hair, her straight back, and she became a thought of mine. Saint Valentine, Saint Valentine. Soft her lips and drink the wine, her soft lips and sip the wine. Saint Valentine, Saint Valentine. February question. What is older than desire? The bare tree asks. Sorrow, says the sky. Sorrow is a river older than desire. Aiglets. You know what aiglets are? A-I-G-L-E-T, aiglets. They're the little plastic things at the end of shoelaces, aglets. They wear out. You use spit for a while, and then buy new laces. Fog burning off. On this gray day, what does the morning say to the afternoon? Here, it says. Here is what the morning says to the afternoon. The usefulness of sitting still. For some reason, it's a little annoying that the old maple tree by the window, even in the Trump administration, is gleaming so happily in the winter sun. Morning, mid-month, pink sky at dawn, and a moth-white moon just past full. Lagunitas Creek, after the long rains, is the color of cafe au lait. One red-headed, orange-beaked mergansers wake rippling in the milky water. February question. What is the great good, asks the rain. Children. Children are the great good, says the foaming gutters. And the seasons? Ask the puddles in the street, mirroring the passage of the clouds. Forget the seasons, they say. The present, says the rain as it bears down, raindrops leaping from the street. Night walk, drought year. The shadowy movement in the dark, in the gardens, is the deer come down from the dry hills to feast on the wet leaves in our gardens. Grand Canyon in February. Rust and rose and salmon pink, pale gold, tobacco brown, and from deep in the canyons, gusts of icy air and a silence unimaginably old. And then the sharp calls of a pair of crows riding the updraft in the winter sun. So, last poem, return to, I thought of this poem about the killings in Miami this week. It's a terrible week. And terrible the way the NRA is going to try to get away with telling us that they're doing something by, anyway, dancing, this is called. The radio clicks on, it's poor swollen America up already and busy selling the exhausting obligation of happiness in the interstices of which debating whether or not a man who kills 50 people in 5 minutes with an automatic weapon he has bought for the purpose is mentally ill, or a terrorist, or if terrorists are mentally ill. Because if killing large numbers of people with sophisticated weapons is a sign of sickness, you may want to start with fire. Our early ancestors, drawn to the warmth of it from lightning, must have been, the great booming flashes of it from the sky. The tree shriveled and sizzling must have been an awful power, the odor of ozone, a god's breath, or grass fires, the wind whipping them, the animals stampeding, furious, driving hard on their haunches from the terror of it, so that to fashion some campfire of burning wood, old logs must have felt like feeding on the crumbs of the god's power. And they would tell the story of Prometheus the thief and the eagle that feasted on his liver. Told it around a campfire must have been. And then centuries, millennia, some tribe of meticulous gatherers, some medicine woman or craftsman of metal discovered sands that tossed into the fire, burned blue or flared green. So simple the children could do it, must have been. Or some soft stone rubbed to a powder that tossed into the fire gave off a white phosphorescent glow. The word for chemistry from a Greek, some say Arabic stem associated with metalwork. But it was in China 2,000 years ago that fireworks were invented. Fire and mineral in a confined space to produce power. They knew already about the power of fire and water and the power of steam. 100 BC, Julius Caesar's day in Alexandria, a Greek mathematician produced a steam-powered turbine engine. Contain, explode. The earliest depiction of a gunpowder weapon is the illustration of a fire lance on a mid-12th century silk banner from Don Huang. Silk and the Silk Road. First Arab guns in the early 14th century, the English used cannons and a siege gun at Calais in 1346. Serignan, 1503, the first battle won by the power of rifles when Spanish arquebusters cut down Swiss pikemen and French cavalry in a battle in southern Italy, explosions of blood and smoke, lead balls tearing open the flesh of horses, and young men, peasants mostly, farm boys, recruited to the armies of their feudal overlords. How did guns come to North America? 2014, a headline, divers discover the Santa Maria. One of the ship's Lombard cabins may have been stolen by salvage pirates this year off the Haitian coast of where it had sunk. And Cortez took Mexico with 600 men, 17 horses, 12 cannons. And La Salle, 1679, constructed a 7-cannon bark, Le Griffon, and fired his cannons upon first entering the continent's interior. The sky darkened by the terror of the birds. In the dream time, they are still rising, swarming, darkening the sky, the chorus of their cries sharpening as the echo of that first astounding explosion shimmers on the waters, the crew blinking at the wind of their wings. Springfield Arsenal, 1777. Rock Island Arsenal, 1862. The original Henry rifle, a 16-shot, 44 caliber rimfire lever action breech-loading rifle, patented, it was an age of tinkerers, by one Benjamin Tyler Henry in 1860, just in time for the Civil War. Confederate casualties in battle, about 95,000. Union casualties in battle, about 110,000. Contain, explode. They were throwing sand into the fire, a blue flare, an incandescent green. The Maxim machine gun, 1914, 400 to 600 small caliber rounds per minute. The deaths in combats all sides, 1914 to 1918, was 8,042,189. Someone was counting, must have been. They could send things whistling into the air by boiling water. The children around the fire must have shrieked with delight. 1920, Iraq, the people of that place were restive under British rule, and the young Winston Churchill invented the policy of aerial policing, which amounted, sources say, to bombing civilians and then pacifying them with ground troops, which led to the tactic of terrorizing civilian populations in World War II. Total casualties in that war worldwide, soldiers 21 million, civilians 27 million. They were throwing sand into the fire. The ancestor who stole lightning from the sky had his guts eaten by an eagle, spread-eagled on a rock, the great bird feasting. They were wondering if he is a terrorist or mentally ill. London, Dresden, Berlin, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the casualties difficult to estimate. There were more people killed, 100,000 in one terrifying moment in the firebombing of Tokyo. 2 arms races after the ashes settled. The other industrial countries couldn't get there fast enough. Contain, burn. One scramble was for the rocket that delivers the explosion that burns humans by the tens of thousands and poisons the earth in the process. They were wondering if the terrorist was crazy, if he was a terrorist. Maybe he was just unhappy. The other challenge afterwards was how to construct machine guns a man or boy could carry, lightweight, compact, easy to assemble. First, a Russian sergeant, a Kalashnikov, clever with guns, built one on a German model. And so the heavy machine gun, the weapon of European imperialism through which a few men trained in gunnery could slaughter native armies, became, quote, a portable weapon a child can operate, end quote, the equalizer. So the undermanned Vietnamese insurgents fought off the greatest army in the world. So the Afghans fought off the Soviet army using Kalashnikovs the CIA provided to them. They were throwing powders into the fire and dancing. Children's armies in Africa toting AK-47s that fire 30 rounds a minute. A round is a bullet. An estimated 500 million firearms on the earth. 100 million of them are Kalashnikov-style semi-automatics. They were dancing in Orlando in a club. Spring night, gay pride, the relation of the total casualties to the history of the weapon that sends exploded metal into their bodies, 30 rounds a minute or 40, is a beautifully made instrument, and in America, you can buy it anywhere. And into the history of the shaming culture that produced the idea of gay pride, they fired it. They were mostly young men. They were dancing in a club, a spring night. The radio clicks on, green fire, blue fire, the immense flocks of terrified birds still rising in wave after wave above the waters in the dream time, crying out sharply, America, the new land, its vast interior, the French ship breasted. The Arabs, the commentator is saying, require a heavy hand. Dancing. They threw powder in a fire. They were dancing. Thanks.